In a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled between rows of neatly trimmed lawns and colorful flower beds, stood Sarah's modest home. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was hers, a cozy sanctuary where she could retreat after long days at work. Out of all the features in her little haven, there was one thing that brought her the most joy: an above-ground pool tucked away in her backyard. Sarah had dreamed of owning a pool for years. Growing up, she'd spent summers visiting her aunt's house, which had a small swimming pool surrounded by tall trees. Those memories stayed with her into adulthood, and when she finally saved enough money to buy her own pool, it felt like a dream come true. She loved everything about it: the way the water sparkled under the sun, the gentle sound of ripples as she floated on a tube, and the peaceful solitude it offered. To Sarah, the pool wasn't just a luxury. It was a symbol of hard work and self-care. But life in the suburbs isn't always as calm as it seems. Next door lived Karen, a woman whose personality couldn't have been more different from Sarah's. Karen was loud, boisterous, and always on the go. She had 3 kids who seemed to have endless energy, running around their yard like tiny tornadoes. Their laughter often echoed through the neighborhood, accompanied by the squeals of excitement from whatever game they were playing. While some neighbors found Karen's family charming, others found them overwhelming. Sarah fell somewhere in the middle. She appreciated their lively spirit but preferred her own quiet routine. For the most part, Sarah and Karen kept to themselves. They exchanged polite smiles during chance encounters at the mailbox, or waved hello across their shared fence. Occasionally, Karen would invite Sarah over for barbecues or holiday gatherings, but Sarah usually declined. Not because she disliked Karen, but because large crowds drained her energy. Still, she tried to be friendly whenever they crossed paths, knowing that maintaining good relationships with neighbors was important. One sweltering July afternoon, Sarah decided to take advantage of the weekend heat wave. She changed into her swimsuit, grabbed a cold drink, and headed out to her backyard. As she settled into a lounge chair beside the pool, she let out a contented sigh. The sun warmed her skin, and the faint hum of bees buzzing around her flower beds added to the relaxing atmosphere. For a moment, all felt right with the world. However, that feeling didn't last long. From somewhere nearby, Sarah heard giggling. At first, she thought nothing of it. It wasn't unusual for Karen's kids to play outside. But as the sounds grew louder and closer, something felt off. Glancing toward the wooden fence separating her property from Karen's, Sarah noticed movement. Through the gaps in the slats, she caught sight of splashing water and realized with growing unease that it was coming from her pool. Her heart sank. Standing up quickly, she walked over to investigate. Sure enough, Karen's 3 children were happily paddling around in her pool, completely oblivious to the fact that they weren't supposed to be there. Shock rippled through Sarah. How had they gotten in? And why hadn't anyone asked permission? Before confronting them directly, Sarah took a deep breath to calm herself. "Hey, kids," she called out gently, trying not to startle them. All 3 heads turned toward her, wide-eyed and guilty. "What are you doing here?" she asked. The oldest child, a boy of about 10, hesitated before answering. "Mom said it was okay." Sarah blinked, stunned. "Your mom said it was okay?" He nodded sheepishly. "Yeah, she told us we could swim here today." A wave of frustration washed over Sarah, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Okay, well, I need you guys to get out now, please. This is my private pool, and no one should be using it without asking me first." The kids scrambled out of the water, dripping onto her patio as they hurried back toward their side of the fence. Watching them leave, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: anger, disbelief, and a lingering sense of violation. How could Karen think it was acceptable to send her children into someone else's property without even consulting them? Later that evening, Sarah approached Karen's front door, determined to address the situation calmly. When Karen answered, she greeted Sarah with a cheerful smile. "Oh, hey, neighbor," she said brightly. "What's up?" "Hi, Karen," Sarah began, forcing a polite tone. I wanted to talk to you about earlier today. Your kids were in my pool, and I just wanted to clarify that I didn't give permission for that. Karen's expression shifted slightly, though she still maintained her casual demeanor. Oh, right. Yeah. I figured you wouldn't mind. The kids were getting restless indoors, and it's such a hot day. I thought, why not let them cool off? Sarah stared at her, dumbfounded. I figured I wouldn't mind. Well, yeah, Karen replied with a shrug. Pools are meant to be enjoyed, right? Plus, it's not like you use it all the time. The audacity of Karen's words left Sarah speechless. Did Karen really believe that her assumption trumped basic respect for personal property? Taking a steadying breath, Sarah tried again. Karen, this is my pool. It's my space, and I decide who uses it. I don't appreciate people coming onto my property without permission. Karen waved a hand dismissively as if brushing away Sarah's concerns. Relax, it's not a big deal. We're neighbors, we're supposed to share things like this. You're being too uptight. Too uptight? Sarah bit back a retort, reminding herself that losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. Instead, she simply reiterated her stance. I understand what you're saying, but I'm asking you to respect my wishes moving forward. Please don't let your kids or anyone else use my pool without asking me first. Karen rolled her eyes but agreed half-heartedly. Fine, whatever, no problem. As Sarah walked back to her house, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in her chest. Something told her this wouldn't be the last time Karen crossed a boundary. Little did she know, her instincts were spot on, and soon she'd be faced with a decision that would change everything. Despite the uneasy conversation with Karen, Sarah hoped that her neighbor would finally understand the importance of respecting boundaries. She decided to take extra steps to ensure her message was clear. Over the next few days, Sarah purchased a sturdy lock for the gate leading to her backyard and installed it herself. She also added a polite yet firm sign on the fence that read, "Private property, no trespassing." It wasn't meant to be hostile. She just wanted to make her expectations crystal clear. For a while, things seemed to quiet down. Sarah returned to her routine, enjoying peaceful afternoons by the pool without interruption. The sound of birds, chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze became her constant companions again. She told herself that maybe Karen had gotten the hint this time. Maybe the combination of their talk, the locked gate, and the sign would be enough to keep her family at bay. But Sarah's optimism didn't last long. One Saturday morning, as she watered her flower beds in the front yard, she heard familiar laughter coming from behind her house. Her stomach tightened instantly. Setting down the watering can, she walked cautiously toward the backyard, dreading what she might find. Sure enough, when she peeked around the corner of her house, she saw Karen's kids splashing around in her pool once again. This time, however, Karen was there too, sprawled out on an inflatable floaty, sipping something from a tall glass, looking completely at ease. Sarah froze for a moment, her mind racing. How had they gotten past the locked gate? Had Karen broken it, or had she simply ignored it altogether? Whatever the case, Sarah felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she marched into the backyard, her hands clenched into fists. "Karen!" she called out sharply, her voice cutting through the cheerful chatter. Everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. Karen lifted her sunglasses, revealing a lazy smirk. "Oh, hey, Sarah," Karen said casually, as if she hadn't just invaded someone else's property. "Nice day for a swim, huh?" Sarah stared at her, incredulous. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone firm but controlled. "I thought we talked about this." Karen shrugged nonchalantly, lowering her sunglasses back over her eyes. "Yeah, we did. But I figured since you weren't using the pool today, it wouldn't hurt to let the kids have some fun. And honestly, it's such a waste to leave it sitting empty all the time." "A waste?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising slightly. "It's my pool, Karen. My property. Whether or not I'm using it doesn't change the fact that you can't. Just barge in whenever you feel like it." Karen sat up now, clearly annoyed. "Come on, Sarah, you're being ridiculous. Neighbors are supposed to share things. It's not like your pool is some sacred temple. That's not how this works, Sarah shot back, her patience wearing thin. You don't get to decide what I should or shouldn't do with my own belongings. If you wanted a pool, you should have bought one yourself. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically as if Sarah's words were unreasonable. Relax, will you? We're not hurting anything. The kids are having fun, and I'm keeping an eye on them. What's the big deal? The big deal, Sarah said, through gritted teeth, is that you're ignoring my wishes repeatedly, and frankly it feels disrespectful. Karen sighed loudly, acting as though Sarah was making a mountain out of a molehill. Fine, we'll leave. Happy now? She gestured for her kids to climb out of the pool, and they scrambled onto the patio, dripping water everywhere. Without another word, Karen gathered her things and headed toward the gate, her flip-flops slapping against the concrete. As soon as they were gone, Sarah sank onto a nearby chair, feeling drained. She had tried reasoning with Karen, setting boundaries, even putting up signs, but none of it mattered. Karen acted as though rules didn't apply to her, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this pattern would ever end. Over the following weeks, Sarah noticed subtle changes in how Karen treated her. While Karen had always been friendly before, albeit intrusive, she now seemed distant and cold. Whenever their paths crossed, Karen avoided eye contact or muttered vague greetings. Worse still, Sarah began hearing whispers from other neighbors. Rumors spread quickly in their tight-knit community, and Karen wasted no time painting Sarah as the villain. She thinks she's better than everyone else, Karen reportedly told her friends during one of their coffee mornings. She won't even let the kids use her pool. Like, who does that? Some of the neighbors nodded sympathetically, siding with Karen. Others remained neutral, unsure of what to believe. A few even started avoiding Sarah altogether, assuming she must be difficult or unfriendly based on Karen's version of events. Sarah felt increasingly isolated, as though she were being punished for standing up for herself. Still, she refused to back down. Every time she looked at her pool, she reminded herself why she had fought so hard to protect it. It wasn't just about the water. It was about principle, about respect, about having control over her own life and property. But as the tension between her and Karen escalated, Sarah realized that something drastic needed to happen. She couldn't keep fighting the same battle over and over again. There had to be a way to reclaim her peace and make sure Karen understood once and for all that certain lines couldn't be crossed. Late one night, as Sarah sat on her porch staring at the stars, an idea began to form in her mind. It was bold, unconventional, and maybe even a little extreme, but it might just work. Turning her pool into something entirely different could solve two problems at once. It would eliminate any temptation for Karen's family to trespass, and it would give Sarah a fresh start, a chance to create something truly special for herself. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. Of course, it wouldn't be easy. Transforming a pool into something else would require time, effort, and money. But Sarah was determined. For too long, she had allowed Karen's actions to dictate her emotions and disrupt her life. Now it was time to take back control and prove that sometimes the best way to handle conflict is to think outside the box. By the time dawn broke, Sarah had made up her mind. She would turn her pool into a koi pond, a serene, beautiful feature that would serve as both a personal retreat and a definitive statement. No longer would her backyard be a source of frustration. Instead, it would become a place of tranquility and pride. And if Karen didn't like it, well, that was her problem, not Sarah's. Sarah's decision to transform her pool into a koi pond wasn't made lightly. It was bold, unconventional, and certainly not cheap, but she knew it was the only way to reclaim her peace. As she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, sketching out ideas and researching online, excitement began to replace her frustration. She envisioned a tranquil oasis, a shimmering pond filled with colorful koi fish, surrounded by lush greenery and soft lighting. It would be a place where she could escape the chaos of the world, including Karen's constant disregard for boundaries. The first step was figuring out how to make the transformation happen. Sarah had no experience with construction or landscaping, so she knew she'd need professional help. After hours of browsing reviews and contacting local contractors, she finally found a team that specialized in custom water features. When they came to assess her pool, Sarah eagerly shared her vision. A serene koi pond that blended seamlessly into her backyard. The lead contractor nodded thoughtfully, jotting down notes as he measured the dimensions of the pool. "It's definitely doable," he said, "but it'll take some time and effort." Time and effort weren't issues for Sarah. Not anymore. She was ready to invest whatever it took to create something truly special. Over the next few weeks, her backyard became a construction zone. Workers arrived early each morning, armed, with tools, materials, and plans. First, they drained the pool completely, leaving behind an empty shell that looked strangely lifeless. Then they reinforced the structure to ensure it could support the weight of water, rocks, and plants. Finally, they lined the interior with a smooth, waterproof surface designed specifically for ponds. While the physical transformation was underway, Sarah immersed herself in learning about koi fish and aquatic plants. She visited local nurseries, consulted experts, and spent countless hours reading articles about maintaining a healthy ecosystem. She learned that koi ponds required careful planning. Everything from filtration systems to oxygen levels mattered. But the more she discovered, the more passionate she became. This project wasn't just about keeping Karen's kids out of her pool. It was about creating something meaningful, something that reflected her personality and values. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's backyard slowly began to change. What had once been a simple above-ground pool was now taking shape as a stunning work of art. The contractors installed layers of smooth river stones along the edges of the pond, giving it a natural, organic look. They added bamboo fountains that trickled water gently into the basin, creating a soothing melody that echoed through the yard. Vibrant water lilies floated on the surface, their petals glowing softly in the sunlight. And then came the peace, the resistance, the koi fish themselves. When the delivery truck pulled up one crisp autumn morning, Sarah felt a flutter of anticipation. Inside were dozens of vibrant koi fish, each one unique in color and pattern. Some were bright orange with hints of gold, while others sported deep reds and whites. Watching them swim gracefully in their temporary tanks, Sarah couldn't help but smile. These beautiful creatures were the final touch her pond needed, and they symbolized a new chapter in her life. Once the fish were carefully introduced to their new home, Sarah stood back to admire the finished product. Her backyard was unrecognizable. Gone was the utilitarian pool. In its place was a breathtaking koi pond that seemed almost magical. Strings of fairy lights wrapped around nearby trees cast a warm glow over the area, while potted ferns and ivy added pops of greenery. Even the air felt different. Calmer, fresher, alive with the sound of trickling water and rustling leaves. But as thrilled as Sarah was with her creation, she knew the real test would come when Karen saw it. She imagined Karen's reaction vividly: confusion, disbelief, maybe even anger. Part of her relished the thought of seeing Karen's face when she realized the pool was gone forever. At the same time, Sarah hoped this drastic change would send a clear message. Respect matters, boundaries matter, and sometimes people will go to great lengths to protect what's theirs. Word spread quickly among the neighbors about Sarah's dramatic makeover. Curious glances turned into outright stares as people walked past her fence, trying to catch a glimpse of the mysterious transformation. Some knocked on her door to ask questions, marveling at the beauty of the koi pond. Others whispered behind her back, speculating about why she'd gone to such extremes. Sarah didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt proud of her property and confident in her decision. One afternoon, as Sarah sat on a bench near the pond, watching the koi glide lazily beneath the surface, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Turning toward the fence, she saw Karen standing there, hands on hips, looking utterly baffled. "What happened to your pool?" Karen demanded, her tone sharp. Sarah smiled faintly, rising to her feet. "Oh, I turned it into a koi pond," she replied matter-of-factly. "I figured it was time for a change." Karen stared at her, mouth agape. Koi pond? Why would you do that? Well, Sarah said calmly, stepping closer to the fence. It's my property, and I wanted something that suited me better. Plus, it's not exactly kid-friendly, is it? For a moment, Karen looked speechless, then her expression hardened. You did this because of us, didn't you? Because of the kids swimming in your pool. I did this because I needed to set boundaries, Sarah corrected her firmly. Boundaries you refuse to respect. This is my space, Karen, and I have every right to decide how it's used. Karen crossed her arms, clearly annoyed. You're being ridiculous. Who spends all that money just to prove a point? Sarah shrugged, unfazed. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just wanted something that makes me happy. Either way, it's none of your business. With that, Sarah turned her back on Karen and returned to her bench. She didn't owe Karen an explanation, or anything else for that matter. As she watched the koi fish dart playfully through the water, she felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Her backyard was hers again, transformed into a sanctuary that reflected her personality and priorities. And if Karen didn't like it, that was fine with Sarah. She had finally taken control of her life, and she wasn't letting anyone take it away from her. In the days that followed, Sarah noticed a shift in Karen's behavior. While she still occasionally shot disapproving looks across the fence, she no longer tried to invade Sarah's space. Her kids stopped asking about the pool, seemingly accepting that it was gone for good. Slowly, but surely, Sarah's bold move paid off, not just in terms of reclaiming her property, but also in teaching Karen a valuable lesson about respect and boundaries. Looking back, Sarah realized that turning her pool into a koi pond had been about more than solving a problem. It was about asserting herself, embracing creativity, and finding joy in the unexpected. And as she sat by her pond each evening, listening to the gentle trickle of water and watching the koi swim lazily in their little paradise, she knew she had made the right choice. Karen's reaction to the koi pond was everything Sarah had imagined, and more. When Karen first laid eyes on the transformation, her face twisted into an expression of disbelief mixed with irritation. Standing at the fence, hands planted firmly, on her hips she stared at the serene scene in Sarah's backyard as if it were some kind of personal affront. The vibrant koi fish glided lazily beneath the surface of the water, their colors shimmering in the sunlight. Bamboo fountains trickled softly, and the lush greenery surrounding the pond gave it an almost magical quality. To anyone else, it might have looked like a peaceful retreat, but to Karen, it seemed like a deliberate act of defiance. "What happened to your pool?" Karen demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tranquil atmosphere. Her tone carried a mix of accusation and incredulity, as though Sarah had committed some unforgivable crime by altering her property. Sarah didn't flinch. She had anticipated this moment, the confrontation, the judgment, the inevitable attempt to make her feel guilty. Instead of reacting defensively, she simply smiled faintly and approached the fence. "Oh, I turned it into a koi pond," she replied matter-of-factly, her tone calm but firm. "I figured it was time for a change." Karen blinked rapidly, clearly struggling to process what she was hearing. "A koi pond? Why would you do that?" "Well," Sarah said, leaning casually against the fence post, "it's my property, and I wanted something that suited me better. Plus, it's not exactly kid-friendly, is it?" For a split second, Karen looked utterly speechless. Then her features hardened, and her lips pressed into a thin line. "You did this because of us, didn't you? Because of the kids swimming in your pool?" Sarah tilted her head slightly, meeting Karen's gaze without hesitation. "I did this because I needed to set boundaries," she corrected gently but firmly. "Boundaries you refuse to respect. This is my space, Karen, and I have every right to decide how it's used." Karen let out a humorless laugh, throwing her hands up, in frustration. "Are you serious? You spent all that money just to prove a point?" "It wasn't about proving a point," Sarah countered smoothly. "It was about creating something that makes me happy, and ensuring that my property is respected. If you'd honored my wishes from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. For once, Karen didn't seem to have a snappy comeback. Her usual confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Clearly, she hadn't expected Sarah to stand her ground so resolutely, or to go to such lengths to reclaim her peace. Unable to argue further, Karen crossed her arms tightly over her chest. "Fine," she muttered, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Do whatever you want, but don't expect me to apologize for trying to be neighborly." With that, she turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, leaving Sarah standing, alone by the fence. As Karen disappeared inside, slamming the door behind her, Sarah couldn't help but feel a small sense of triumph. She hadn't sought revenge or drama. She had simply taken control of her own life. And if Karen couldn't understand that, then that was her problem, not Sarah's. Word of Sarah's dramatic transformation spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Neighbors who had previously dismissed her as quiet or reserved suddenly took notice. Some were genuinely curious, stopping by to admire the koi pond and compliment its beauty. Others whispered behind closed doors, speculating about Sarah's motives and whether she was being overly harsh. Opinions were divided, and Sarah knew she couldn't please everyone. But she also realized something important. The people whose opinions truly mattered, the ones who valued kindness, respect, and integrity, would see her side of the story. 1. Day, while Sarah was tending to the plants around the pond, her next-door neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Thompson, stopped by for a chat. A retired school teacher in her late 60s, Mrs. Thompson had always been warm and friendly, often bringing Sarah fresh-baked cookies or offering gardening tips. Today, however, her visit felt different, more intentional. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Mrs. Thompson asked, gesturing toward the pond. "Of course not," Sarah replied with a smile, stepping aside to give her a better view. "What do you think?" Mrs. Thompson clasped her hands together, her eyes lighting up with admiration. "Oh, Sarah, it's absolutely stunning. I've never seen anything like it. Those fish are gorgeous." "Thank you," Sarah said, feeling a swell of pride. "It was quite the project, but I'm really happy with how it turned out." Mrs. Thompson nodded thoughtfully, then hesitated before speaking again. "I heard about, well, the situation with Karen. I won't pretend to know all the details, but I will say this. You handled it with grace. Turning your pool into a koi pond. It's creative, bold, and honestly kind of brilliant. Not many people would have the courage to do something like that." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected such heartfelt validation, especially from someone she admired as much as Mrs. Thompson. "I just wanted to reclaim my space," she admitted softly. "And maybe send a message that boundaries are important." "Well, you certainly did that," Mrs. Thompson said with a chuckle. "And frankly, I think you've inspired a few of us to speak up when we need to. Sometimes, standing your ground is the best way to earn respect." Their conversation lingered in Sarah's mind long after Mrs. Thompson left. It reminded her that even in moments of conflict, there can be opportunities for growth, for herself, and for those around her. While not everyone in the neighborhood agreed with her decision, she began to notice subtle shifts in how people treated her. Some neighbors who had once kept their distance started saying hello more often, inviting her to community events or sharing small gestures of goodwill. Slowly but surely, Sarah found herself becoming part of the fabric of the neighborhood. Not because she forced it, but because she earned respect by staying true to herself. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah settled into her new routine. Mornings were spent sipping coffee by the pond, watching the koi fish dart playfully beneath the surface. Afternoons were devoted to tending to the plants, trimming leaves, and ensuring the filtration system ran smoothly. Evenings brought a sense of calm as she lit candles around the pond and listened to the gentle trickle of water under the stars. Her backyard had become more than just a space. It was a sanctuary, a reflection of her personality and values. Meanwhile, Karen kept her distance. Though their interactions remained polite, they were minimal and awkward. Karen's kids no longer lingered near the fence, and the constant noise from their yard seemed to fade away. Whether it was out of resentment or resignation, Sarah didn't know, and frankly, she didn't care. What mattered most was that her peace had been restored. Looking back, Sarah realized that turning her pool into a koi pond had taught her an invaluable lesson. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means making unconventional choices. It wasn't just about solving a problem. It was about embracing creativity, asserting independence, and finding joy in the unexpected. And as she sat by her pond each evening, surrounded by beauty and tranquility, she knew she had made the right choice. As the seasons changed, so too did the dynamics of Sarah's neighborhood. The once vivid colors of summer gave way to the crisp air and golden hues of autumn, followed by the quiet stillness of winter. Through it all, Sarah's koi pond remained a constant, a shimmering jewel in her backyard that drew admiration from anyone who saw it. But more than its beauty, the pond symbolized a turning point in Sarah's life. It marked the moment she stopped letting others dictate how she should live and started prioritizing her own happiness. The transformation didn't just affect Sarah. It rippled outward, subtly altering the way people interacted with her. Neighbors, who had previously dismissed her as aloof or unapproachable, began to see her in a new light. They noticed how much care and effort she put into maintaining her backyard oasis, and they couldn't help but be impressed. Some even admitted privately that they admired her boldness. Turning a pool into a koi pond wasn't something everyone would have the courage or creativity to do, and Sarah's decision earned her a newfound respect. One chilly spring morning, as Sarah was pruning the ivy near the pond, she heard a soft knock on her front door. Opening it, she found Mrs. Thompson standing there with a basket of freshly baked muffins. "Thought you might like these," the older woman said with a warm smile. "Blueberry. Your favorite, right?" Sarah laughed, touched by the gesture. "You remembered. Thank you so much." Mrs. Thompson stepped inside briefly, glancing around at the cozy interior of Sarah's home. "I also wanted to check in," she added gently. "How are things going? You've been through quite a lot." "Lately." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Things are better," she said honestly. "It took some time to adjust, but I feel like I've finally reclaimed my space and my peace. This pond has become such a big part of my life now. It's funny how something so simple can make such a difference." Mrs. Thompson patted her arm affectionately. "That's because it's not just about the pond. It's about what it represents, taking control, setting boundaries, and finding joy in your own terms. Not many people have the strength to do that. Sarah, you should be proud of yourself." The word stayed with Sarah long after Mrs. Thompson left. She realized that the koi pond wasn't just a physical transformation. It was a reflection of her personal growth. For years, she had avoided conflict, fearing that standing up for herself might alienate others. But through this experience, she learned that true connections aren't built on avoidance or appeasement. They're built on mutual respect and authenticity. By asserting herself, she hadn't pushed people away. She had invited them to see her for who she truly was. Karen, meanwhile, continued to keep her distance. Their interactions were polite but distant, limited mostly to brief nods when they crossed paths. Occasionally, Sarah caught glimpses of Karen's kids playing in their yard, their laughter echoing faintly in the background. At first, she worried that the tension between them might create lasting animosity, but over time she realized something surprising. The absence of drama felt liberating. Without the constant stress of dealing with Karen's intrusions, Sarah found herself opening up to other neighbors in ways she never had before. She attended community events, joined a local gardening club, and even hosted a small gathering in her backyard one summer evening. To her delight, several neighbors showed up, eager to see the famous koi pond up close. As they mingled under string lights and shared stories over lemonade, Sarah felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced in years. One of the guests that night was a young couple who had recently moved in down the street. They introduced themselves as Emily and Mark, explaining that they had heard so much about Sarah's pond and wanted to meet the woman behind it. "We think it's amazing what you did," Emily said earnestly. Not just the pond itself, but how you stood your ground. It takes guts to do something like that. Sarah blushed, surprised by the compliment. Thank you. I guess I just got tired of feeling like I didn't have a say in my own life. Sometimes you have to take drastic measures to protect what matters most. Mark nodded thoughtfully. And look at the outcome. Your backyard is incredible. Honestly, we're inspired. We've been talking about adding a water feature to our yard, but we weren't sure where to start. Do you mind if we ask for advice? Of course not, Sarah replied warmly. I'd love to help. That conversation marked the beginning of a friendship. Over the following months, Sarah spent countless hours helping Emily and Mark design their own backyard pond. In return, they invited her to dinners, movie nights, and weekend hikes. Slowly but surely, Sarah's social circle expanded, filling her life with meaningful connections she hadn't anticipated. Reflecting on everything that had happened, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come. What had started as a frustrating dispute with Karen had evolved into an opportunity for self-discovery and growth. Transforming her pool into a koi pond hadn't just solved a practical problem, it had given her a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. She no longer felt like an outsider in her own neighborhood. Instead, she felt like a valued member of a supportive community. Even Karen's attitude seemed to soften over time. One day, while Sarah was outside feeding the koi fish, she heard a hesitant voice call out from the fence. Turning, she saw Karen standing there holding a plate of cookies. Hey, Karen said awkwardly. I, made these. Thought maybe we could call a truce. Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised but amused. A truce, huh? Karen shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Look, I know I messed up. I shouldn't have let the kids use your pool without asking, and I definitely shouldn't have acted like it was okay, so I'm sorry. For a moment, Sarah considered rejecting the apology outright. After everything Karen had put her through, it would have been easy to hold a grudge. But as she looked at Karen, her posture stiff with discomfort, her expression sincere, she realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing bad behavior. It was about moving forward. Thank you, Sarah said finally, accepting the plate of cookies. I appreciate the apology. Let's just agree to respect each other's boundaries from now on, okay? Karen nodded quickly, relief washing over her face. Deal. Though their relationship never returned to its previous level of casual friendliness, the tension between them eased significantly. Sarah no longer felt the need to guard her property obsessively, knowing that Karen understood the importance of respecting boundaries. And while they may not have been close friends, they coexisted peacefully, a small but significant victory. As another year passed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the lessons she had learned. Life in the suburbs wasn't always perfect, but it was hers, and she had fought hard to make it that way. Her koi pond had become more than just a beautiful feature in her backyard. It was a reminder of her resilience, creativity, and determination to live authentically. On quiet evenings, as she sat by the pond watching the koi fish glide beneath the surface, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had shaped her, for the neighbors who had supported her, and for the courage she had discovered within herself. She knew that life would always present obstacles, but she also knew that she had the strength to overcome them. And so, surrounded by the gentle sounds of trickling water and rustling leaves, Sarah embraced the future with open arms. Whatever came next, she was ready,